Anyhow, did you have any examples of my strange teachings?
Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects pedophiles, or that slave will exploit you so they can live lives of luxury.
We love the serene setting here at our world headquarters on Blue Lake in New York State. At times, the water is as smooth as a mirror. We occasionally see eagles and hawks fly by. And in the fall of the year, when the leaves change colors, the forest can look spectacular. However, we cannot take our beautiful peace for granted.
Hundreds, maybe thousands of slaves who cater to his every desire.
It's not maintained automatically.
I'm going to take that second strange teaching about Watchtower exploiting Jehovah's Witnesses first, but I'm not going to mention donations.
We in no way want to be categorized with other organizations, religious and otherwise, that coerce their supporters to donate. However,
and I'm not going to mention all the free labor you receive for your theocratic construction projects.
At times, it's hard to get them to go home for the night. They just want to stay and continue to work because they see the amount of work that needs to be done.
Instead, I'm going to play a short clip and then ask a simple question.
You may want to get a pen or something to write this down. Are you ready? Recently, it was announced that regular pioneers will once again have an hour requirement, effective March 1st, 2023. Pioneers are now busy looking at their schedules and planning how they'll be able to meet the hour requirement. The governing body decided back in 1999 to adjust the hour requirements. The governing body has decided to adjust the hour requirements. The requirement will now be 600 hours per year. But notice this. This is very exciting. During March and April, and during the month of the Circuit Overseer's visit, publishers can choose to auxiliary pioneer with a reduced hour requirement of 15 hours. This is powerful evidence of the great love and tender concern that Jehovah feels for his people.
Where in the Bible are
Our requirements
ever mentioned? Because I've looked and I can't find any scriptures suggesting that true Christians must document and report their so-called personal ministry to anyone, anywhere. The Bible is silent on this subject.
Where the Bible is silent, we must be silent.
You keep saying that, but the Watchtower has never been silent about our requirements. In 1943, it stated, "These expressions of God's will by his king and through his established agency constitute his law or rule of action for the faithful and wise servant and for their goodwill companions today who will dwell upon the earth forever in the new world." The Lord breaks down our organizational instructions further and makes them more practicable by further instructing us through his faithful and wise servant. He says, "Let us assign the field, the world, to special pioneers, regular pioneers, and companies of Jehovah's Witnesses in an orderly way, sufficient for everyone to thoroughly witness therein. And let us place upon each one the responsibility of caring for the New World's interests in these respective assignments." He says the requirements for special pioneers shall be 175 hours and 50 back calls per month, which should develop into a reasonable number of studies, and for regular pioneers 150 hours and as many back calls and studies as can be properly developed during that time.
Interesting that Jesus should mention this.
And for company publishers, he says, let us make a quota of 60 hours and 12 back calls, and at least one study a week for each publisher. These directions come to us from the Lord through his established agency directing what is required of us. This expression of the Lord's will should be the end of all controversy. It is for your good that these requirements are made, for thereby you are enabled to prove your integrity and magnify the Lord's name. These directions from the Lord come to us as individuals and as collective units called companies.
Truly, Jehovah is speeding up the work.
Get out of here, Mark.
We've received so many cards and letters from brothers and sisters who are thrilled with the new hour requirements for pioneers. One sister wrote, "As a mother, wife, homemaker, part-time worker, and caretaker for elderly parents, you have absolutely no idea what the update did for me today. I have tears even as I am writing. We are all so tired right now, but want nothing more than to faithfully serve Jehovah and stay active in reaching people in these last days. Another sister wrote, I cried. I have kidney dialysis 3 times a week. It takes a lot of my strength, but 15 hours, I can do that. What a wonderful God we have.
For me, some of the best evidence that the Watchtower Corporation is exploiting Jehovah's Witnesses is how grateful they become when you act like you're doing them a favor by demanding slightly less of something that you have absolutely no right, scripturally, to be demanding.
We simply cannot go beyond what is written.
1,502,797,703 hours just in 2022 alone.
How much greater is a billion than a million? 1,000 times greater.
And all of it spent trying to convince more innocent, ignorant people to support your corporate expansion plans with their time, money, and the lives of their children.
We thank you, parents, for all that you've done and the precious gifts you've offered up to Jehovah and his organization.
Moving on to the other strange teaching you mentioned earlier. What was it again, Steve?
That the faithful slave protects pedophiles.
Right. So normally, this is where I'd play a bunch of clips to demonstrate what shameless liars you are. But when I started doing that, I ended up with an 86-minute video and a 26-minute summary of that video, both of which are linked below.
Check it out. Don't just circulate it, don't just believe it, check it out.
You know all about what's happening in Pennsylvania, right, Steve?
No, I do not know anything about that.
The 19 victims and 4 men who are being charged with sexually violating them are all members of the Jehovah's Witness organization.
So you haven't read the Attorney General's presentments for those 4 cases?
The answer is no.
What about the 5 others that were released just last month?
Again, the answer is no.
Well, when I read them, I cried.
All of the defendants and all of the victims come from the same religious organization, the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Wrought from within.
Surely you're aware that every congregation in Pennsylvania is now under subpoena, right?
Maybe.
Every single congregation in the state of Pennsylvania is now under subpoena, one county at a time, to turn over every single child abuse document in their possession going back to January 1st, 1987.
What we see is often only the tip of the iceberg.
Watchtower Legal Department and the governing body have hired the same law firm that defended the Catholic Church.
Spending Jehovah's money.
Judas was also entrusted with caring for the finances.
For some reason, none of those recent developments have appeared on the jw.org newsroom page.
We could call this a sin of omission.
Yeah, it's almost like if Jehovah's Witnesses knew what you were really spending their money on, they might stop donating.
And no amount of money can fix it.
We try to make ourselves look as good as possible, don't we?
Yes, you do. And don't think I didn't notice the very specific language you're using for those strange teachings.
That the faithful slave protects pedophiles. Or that slave will exploit you.
No former Jehovah's Witness or so-called apostate would ever say the faithful slave protects pedophiles, because obviously they do not agree that the Watchtower's governing body is the faithful and discreet slave. Stating things that way is a rhetorical trick meant to stop Jehovah's Witnesses' brains from thinking thoughts that might undermine your authority in their captivity. Essentially, it's a cognitive dissonance grenade.
Boom.
That the so-called faithful slave does protect pedophiles and has for decades is unthinkable to a J-Dub, because if the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses protects pedophiles, then clearly they are not the faithful slave. But you must reject reality and dismiss your victim stories, because if you honestly acknowledge that Jehovah's organization is permissive to pedophiles, then how could it really be Jehovah's organization?
That does not make sense.
The answer to that question leads mentally captive Jehovah's Witnesses to an emotional crossroads that most of them aren't prepared to deal with.
A dilemma. A quandary.
Because it exposes them to threats of scapegoating, expulsion, shunning, and the sudden and total loss of their family, friends, and identities. Hang on a second. Am I in a cult?
The answer is obvious, isn't it?
So, does the faithful slave protect pedophiles? No, because the faithful slave is a concept, not a person. You, Stephen, you, along with other members of the governing body and assorted Watchtower leaders, lawyers, and lackeys, you, in your role as guardians of doctrine, as well as through the direction you provide to the writing, teaching, service, and legal committees, your global network of branch committees, and congregation elders following the legal advice of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, you all protect pedophiles and exploit Jehovah's Witnesses all over the world. And what do you have to say to that?
Bald-faced lies.
Just keep saying it.